Thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to talk with us and share with our organization the awesome work that you're doing for the district and helping Black women and girls. And so we're hosting this webinar to discuss issues around crime. And I know that is something that your office has been largely engaged with and working to solve some of the district's most pressing problems now that we've seen the increase in crime since last year. So we have a few questions I'd like to ask you, and there may be some follow-ups, but we'll try to make the best use of your time. And again, thank you for participating in this webinar.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to our conversation.
Yes, certainly. So let's jump right in. So over the past several months, we have observed a significant increase in crime in DC, including the rise in homicides, carjackings, and robberies. What is your current perspective on the state of public safety in the district?
And thank you once again, Lori, and to all the members of the National Coalition of 100 Black Women. I really appreciate you all's advocacy and really having this discussion. I think the state of our city right now, as it pertains to crime and violence, is that we are really living through a crisis. I think that we are in a state of emergency, frankly, with respect to the violence that we're seeing throughout the District of Columbia. We had 274 homicides last year, which is the highest number of homicides that we've seen in a generation. And frankly, it is unacceptable. What we're seeing are brazen crimes like robberies, carjackings, homicides, shootouts occur in communities across the district, occur along business corridors. We're seeing the types of crime not just be perpetrated by adults, but by young people, both young boys and girls, teenagers. And so it is really a crisis. And the reality is, it is feeding a culture of violence, of gun violence in particular, which has the unfortunate effect of breeding a culture of fear amongst residents across communities. And it is completely unacceptable, which is why we have to absolutely do more, both on the law enforcement side, but also with respect to the policies that we put in place that address the root causes of crime. I say all the time, if a young person has something to do, if they are in school, if they're being productive, in the arts, at band or on a sports team, then they're likely not going to be that young person who is chasing behind you to steal your purse or to take your wallet. If they are, have a job, if they're able to put the food on the table for themselves or support the household, if there are challenges in their household, then those kids are typically the ones that we don't have to worry as much about. And so we have to make sure that the supports and services are in place for kids before they decide to engage in crime and violence. The prevention is just as important as actually the enforcement on the other end. Frankly, I think it's more important.
Yes, yeah, I think well, I can speak for myself. We grew up, under the adage, you stay busy, you stay out of trouble. And so maybe some of those basic precepts, we can somehow figure out how we can provide those services, particularly to our younger generation, our younger girls. Our organization, of course, as you said, we advocate for women, Black women and girls. And so that is a particular interest to us, the young Black females, hearing some of the reports and how hearing about young Black girls being involved in the carjackings and theft. And so we are seeking to figure out how we can help the district, help government in that area, and maybe some programs that we can assist with. So given your experience, what do you see as the most effective role for local law enforcement in ensuring public safety? And how can it be balanced with potential federal intervention?
I think that's a great question. My background, before I was on the council, I was a practicing attorney, previously a prosecutor in Prince George's County as assistant state's attorney. I was a trial attorney at the U.S. Department of Justice in the Civil Rights Division Special Litigation Section, where I actually traveled the country, and part of our duties were to look at law enforcement agencies that have been accused of violating people's rights with their accusations of excessive force or pattern or practice of misconduct. We would bring in police practices experts, offer technical assistance. And I say all that to say, I bring a myriad of experiences, having grown up in the District of Columbia during the 80s and 90s when we were nationally known as the murder capital. And so I think the most effective way that law enforcement can really help the situation that we're seeing right now is to be present, to be visible, importantly, to be a part of the community, to be woven into the fabric of the District of Columbia in a way that they aren't just simply responding when someone calls 911. When I was growing up in the District of Columbia, I had a police officer who lived 3 doors down from me. In fact, he was my best friend's older brother. When I would go to the Boys and Girls Club to play basketball at number 10 at 14th and Clifton, my coach, Mitch Cradle, was on the police force. I was greeted when I opened the door by Officer Lynch. I was not in an adversarial relationship with those individuals because I knew them, I trusted them. They provided mentorship, friendship, guidance to me outside of what I got in the home, which is obviously important as well. And so I think it's important for law enforcement to understand that in order to do the police work, to solve cases when somebody is the victim of a crime, you have to have relationships. And I think it really takes quality community policing. It's something that I know personally, I know professionally. I've been a part of trying to implement those things here at the council through the work that I've done when I chaired the Judiciary Committee and the work that I've done for years as a former Ward 5 council member, now at-large council member. To focus on fostering strong relationships between law enforcement and the community that are really relationships forged well before a crime occurs. It is being integrated into all the things that happen within the culture of a community within a city. And I'd like to see more of that, frankly. I'd like to see more patrols on corridors that require, deterrence from some of the quality of life crimes that we're seeing. Some of the retail thefts we're seeing have been extraordinarily troubling. You've got stores that are shutting down. It's CVS in Columbia Heights is just the latest victim of some of the things that we've seen across the District of Columbia, and the impact that it has when these stores start to think about closing is you lose the goods and services that these places provide. You lose the jobs that they provide in those communities, and it really is something that needs to be dealt with to a greater degree than what we're seeing right now.
Yes, and that is so true. I totally agree with that, because crime really does impact the entire community, not just specific populations, but all of those that live in that particular community. And those that live in the community are dependent on those goods and services. And so now we have an escalating situation now where we're trying to keep the people serviced in our district, but we have this thing called crime. And so that's why we're here chatting with you to figure out again, how can we be of service? What can we do? And how can we support some of the initiatives that you're planning to implement as well? Absolutely. And so with that, could you please provide an overview of the current crime and public safety policies in Washington, D.C.?
Sure.
How does the council evaluate? I'm sorry, I apologize, but how does the council evaluate the effectiveness, especially in addressing the concerns of Black women and Black girls?
Sure. So I break the crime down into prevention as well as intervention, but also enforcement. And thinking about the way that they fit into those buckets, there are a number of laws that are on the books that arm the Metropolitan Police Department and other local law enforcement, federal partners with the tools to make arrests. The United States Attorney's Office, which prosecutes felonies in the District of Columbia, the DC Attorney General's Office that prosecutes juvenile crimes in the District of Columbia, and other federal partners, including Pretrial Services Agency, Court Services and Offender Supervision Agency. When it comes to juveniles, you've got the Court Social Services Division. And so I named those partners because there needs to be greater collaboration and coordination amongst our law enforcement partners to make sure that when somebody commits a crime, that they're held accountable. I really think about crime in a way that focuses on accountability and opportunity and prevention, frankly. When somebody commits a crime, I think it bears repeating, they have to be held accountable. And that accountability needs to happen swiftly and it needs to happen certainly. But we also need to remember that a lot of what we're seeing in terms of the root causes of crime play out because of communities that have really suffered through generations and cycles of poverty, and trying to make sure that we're providing the opportunity component that helps us give people what they need to prevent them from making the decision to engage in crime. What we're seeing with some of the brazen things really, I think, is still playing out as a result of the experiences that a lot of our young people had during the COVID-19 pandemic. I know it's 2024 and it's been some years since the pandemic, but the reality is those 7, 8-year-olds who were struggling during the pandemic, who were being disconnected from their school for whatever reason, they couldn't learn the way that they needed to virtually. They were struggling to make sure that they ate healthy foods. They perhaps lost a loved one, a parent or a caregiver. Those 7 and 8-year-olds are now the 11 and 12-year-olds who we're seeing commit some of these crimes. And so we have to have that context when thinking about how to respond to crime. There's the enforcement component that I already talked about with our law enforcement, both MPD and our federal partners. But then I think about crime in terms of what agencies that are non-law enforcement can do to address some of the challenges that young folks are experiencing. What more can our Department of Parks and Recs do? What more can our schools do to be open and accessible after school, before school, to support our kids? I think about our Department of Mental Health, our Department of Behavioral Health. How are they coordinating with law enforcement to prevent things from escalating to situations like we see play out occasionally throughout the District of Columbia? And so we really have to have an all hands on deck response and interagency response to the violence that we're seeing, ensuring both that we're holding people accountable when they commit crimes, which is absolutely key to our criminal justice system, but also we're flooding communities with opportunity in the way that we flood them with law enforcement after a crime occurs. We need to flood those communities with opportunity before crimes occur so that they're aware of the resources and supports that the District of Columbia offers. Because in many cases, the city does offer a number of programs that could be helpful to young folks and to their families, frankly. In some cases, the connection isn't being made adequately to make sure that the young folks are getting those programs, those supports, and those services.
Yes, and I applaud the district with that, because this is one of the cities that I've lived in that have programs, social programs for almost every, from kids to adults to our seniors, and DC should be applauded for that. Yeah. And that's what I think makes the city one of the great cities and to live in. But also, I just want to follow up on that question as far as federal maybe partnerships or collaboration. Is your office currently supporting, or is the district currently working with other federal agencies in this crime?
The District of Columbia is uniquely situated when it comes to our criminal legal system, in that a good number of agencies require to maintain public safety in the nation's capital are federal agencies. I named a few of them earlier, including the prosecutions of felonies in the District of Columbia is not done on the adult side, at least, by a local prosecutor. It's done by a federal prosecutor that is appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. It is the same with the Court Services and Offender Supervision Agency, so parole and probation. When you think about the pretrial services, pretrial detention, decisions being made around that happen with the pretrial sentences agency. And so those are all federal entities that work with local law enforcement on our criminal justice system. Our judges are appointed by the President of the United States and confirmed by the Senate. And so it actually presents challenges when you think about vacancies that exist on our courts and the ability to have justice be meted out within our court system, making sure we have enough resources in terms of judges and others that we need to be able to keep the system functioning in a way that allows justice to happen efficiently. So in terms of programs, there are a number of things that those entities are doing that we coordinate with on the local side and that I support as a council member. I will say, though, that I think some of this in terms of crime and how we prevent it really, I think, is getting back to basics, frankly. I think it is getting back to some of the things that we saw, community norms that existed in terms of the village that was created in neighborhoods across the District of Columbia. I've had a meeting with the U.S. Attorney, with the Attorney General, with the Chief Judge of Superior Court, with the Public Defender for the District of Columbia not too long ago that I convened at American University Law School in order to talk about crime and talk about prevention and what more we could do, both to address the long-term root causes, but also the short-term response that would help prevent some of the things that we're seeing play out in our streets across the District of Columbia. So I'm working collaboratively with our federal partners and making sure that we can support efforts that keep people safe here in the District of Columbia.
Somehow I figured you were, but thank you so much. Okay, so with your background, how can the impact of crime on educational opportunities for Black girls be addressed? And what measures can be taken to ensure the safety and well-being of Black youth in schools and in our neighborhoods?
It is one of the most pressing questions that we have to answer. Frankly, we have to do a better job of creating a community and culture of safety. I touched on earlier in response to one of your questions earlier about the culture of violence, culture of gun violence that exists in some communities across the District of Columbia, and how it really has led to a culture of fear for some people who are literally changing their behaviors as families. They're changing their patterns of how they travel, modes of travel, when they go out and shop or visit family and friends, and it is taking a toll on the District of Columbia. I think we have to do more to create a culture of safety and a culture of accountability within communities, and we can do that in schools, right? Working with the school administrators and teachers, but not putting too much on the plate of our teachers because they already do enough. I think we've had conversations about safe passages to and from school to make sure that kids feel safe when they're going to what should be a safe space inside of every school here in the District of Columbia, and making sure the resources exist. Because right now, and I just had a meeting recently with one of the organizations locally that are advocating for additional supports for safe passages, and it's something that I'm passionate about and have worked with a number of schools to facilitate because a lot of the resources have been dedicated to schools that absolutely need them, but they've been schools in certain parts of the city. For example, parts of Ward 5, parts of Ward 7 and 8. And frankly, there are just a lot more schools that need safe passage programs to be able to make sure that they're getting their kids to and from school safely. Now, outside of school, before and after school, when I talked earlier about that village that existed in neighborhoods, that culture of accountability. When I was growing up, I didn't always make the best decisions, but I will tell you, if I saw senior citizens around, if I was on the metro bus or the train or walking in the neighborhood, I was always worried about who might see me. Because it would likely get back to my household with my mom and my dad or my grandparents, my uncles or my aunts, and then I would be held accountable. I think we've gotten away from that and trying to make sure that we are creating a community in our rec centers, in our parks, really facilitating more programs that bring people together to get to know one another. Our city has changed a lot over the last 20 to 30 years. We've seen the demographic shift, we've seen the population change, but it doesn't mean we can't have a sense of community. And I'm really working hard to facilitate that, including I'll be meeting again soon with folks in the faith community to try to help them, or not help them, but to really call on them to take a much more active role in some of the things that we're seeing play out in violence in the District of Columbia. When I think about 100 Black women, Metro DC, I really think about how involved you all are and how you could help facilitate a greater sense of community when it comes to some of the sports activities, when it comes to dance programs. Where are they happening? Are they happening in every neighborhood that needs them? Are they happening in every rec center that needs them? I think about how many community centers used to exist in schools, right? Some of those schools have gone from being DC public schools to DC public charter schools, and you don't have the rec center inside of Taft Junior High like you had it when I was growing up. You don't have the number 11 Boys and Girls Club in the location that it existed off of MLK, where there was a Safeway right outside of it. These things don't exist in the same way, and we have to get back to basics and really pushing and drilling down and creating a culture of safety within our communities and a culture of accountability.
Yes, and I've highlighted that because living in the district and we're seeing our neighborhoods change. The demographics are changing. And so a lot of the programs may still be available, but participation could be low, or maybe a person in the community that ran that program no longer lives in that community. So there's definitely.
You see it play out on some of the fields. You see some of the exchanges and interactions happening around people trying to reserve fields at DPR facilities, and there being conflicts because maybe the kids want to play football and somebody's playing soccer. Here's the thing. We got to stop pitting people against each other because perhaps some of the different communities have different interests and different priorities. I would rather us focus less on what makes us different, frankly, and focus more on what we share in common. I like to expose more kids across the District of Columbia to different sports outside of the traditional football, baseball, basketball, right? More kids should be playing golf. More kids should be playing volleyball. Giving them supports and resources they need if they're good to play at a higher level. We know how much it costs to play AAU or club soccer or club volleyball. And a lot of kids across the District of Columbia who want those experiences, who could use those experiences, who would keep them in a structured environment outside of crime, need the supports and resources from the city to facilitate that. And I'm focused like a laser to make sure that those kids who need it, those families who need it, will get that.
Yes, I think we found an excellent opportunity for the 100 to step in and support. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
All right, so with that though, how do you envision strengthening the relationship between law enforcement and residents in the community, particularly in light of recent concerns about policing?
No, I touched a little bit about my background, working in the United States Department of Justice, and traveling the country, working with police practices experts, where there were police departments who had challenges. And often there were communities who would reach out to the Justice Department to let them know the things that they were experiencing. And I always think it really boils down, and I know it might sound a bit trite. It's a phrase that people are using more and more often these days, but community policing is the key. It is the type of policing that does not simply, focus on communities of color in a way that is harassing them. It is the type of policing that facilitates relationships with people who live in communities. If you are a law enforcement officer and you're walking in a community, perhaps you should know the grandma who's sitting on the porch, right? Because that grandma sitting on the porch probably knows all the kids in the neighborhood, right? And you should probably know the pastor who pastors out of the church on the corner. Why? Because there are people who worship at that church, and perhaps those relationships will help you become better at your job, get to know people, but also close cases when crimes occur. Community policing really is key. And I've done a number of things in the past to help build and foster a better sense of community policing in the District of Columbia, but we've got to do more, honestly. And part of what we need to do that I'm working on, and we'll have a bill to address this, is to provide better incentives for law enforcement to live in the District of Columbia. It is extraordinarily expensive to live here in the city. I mentioned earlier that I had coaches, I had neighbors who were police officers, and frankly, when you have a community like mine, where the homes are going for a lot more today than they used to when my mom and dad were in the home and I was growing up there, a lot of officers can't afford to live here, right? And so what does it take? What more can we do as a city to facilitate, not just police for that matter, I think first responders more broadly, fire department, EMS, you think about our Unified Communications Center. There's been a lot of attention paid to what's happening over there. They should be able to afford to live in the District of Columbia. When you think about the office of our chief medical examiner and the people who do that work around forensics, the lab, the challenges there, we should be creating more incentives to have people be able to work in the District of Columbia and live in the District of Columbia. And when it comes to law enforcement in particular, I think it is key to foster those types of meaningful, deep-rooted relationships that can help prevent crime before it happens, but also to close cases after crimes occur. And so that's something that I'm working on, and hopefully we'll have some legislation be introduced to the council soon.
All right, well, Councilman McDuffie, those are all the questions that I have. I don't know if you have any closing remarks.
Just to say that I really appreciate everything that you all are doing. Your organization has really been such an advocate at the council, and it's impactful to me when I have partners like the 100 Black Women of Metro DC to be able to come into the Wilson Building, to have events, to facilitate these types of dialogue, because as smart as my mother thinks that I am, I know I'm not smart enough to have all the solutions. And on many occasions, the solutions really emanate from the people in the community, from people who are members of your organization. And so I appreciate the partnership, and I look forward to making sure that we are not having the same discussion, a year from now about the crime levels that we're seeing. I'm hoping that we will see a dip and that we will not see as much crime as we're experiencing today in the District of Columbia. We absolutely have to address it, and I'm going to be your partner in trying to do so.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
On behalf of the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, the Washington, D.C. chapter, we certainly thank you for your service to our city, and I thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you very much.